Between the rise of the Kimrog Empire and the tumultuous Demon Wars, there was an enigmatic era. A time when brave souls traversed oceans and continents in search of glory, riches, and power. Let us tell you of the days of high adventure.
Hello, and welcome back to High Adventure. I am once again here for another interlude with Cade. And in the last episode, Cade had traveled very far from the island of Nisia, the island where he and his brothers had established themselves and connected with other people who had started a small settlement. And going from island to island, Cade, you had discovered some things along the way in your journey. But you also came across a ship. And going aboard that ship, you met the captain, Captain Elysia, who described to you that she was actually returning from a delivery to the island of Halry, and she was returning to the island of Kam Emet. And you had shared some information with her regarding some of the discoveries that you had along the way in your journey, as well as the experiences of what brought you to Nisia. As her ship traveled, it arrived at the harbor of the port city of Sasalem on the island of Kam Emet. And the ship anchored, and you came out of her quarters, and just at dusk, basically, like, you see lights in the distance from this walled city. You see lights on the docks of the harbors, and you see that there are a few dozen boats and ships, fishing boats along some of the smaller docks, some medium-sized boats and ships on docks, but also anchored in the harbor. And even in the distance, kind of to the north corner of the harbor, you see a larger ship, like a caravel-sized ship, anchored out in the harbor. In short order, the crew of her ship begins prepping and getting longboats coming from the dock. They are gathering their personal belongings, and one boat after another. Captain Elysia tells you that she's, happy to bring you into the city and, kind of show you around. So, after all of her crew has disembarked, she and a few of the others, including the quartermaster and you, get on the last boat and take that to the dock. And by the time that process is done, it is indeed nighttime. You climb a ladder up onto the dock, and Captain Elysia leads you down the dock, and you see kind of all of the docks converge in a long wooden walkway. And there's a small single-story building, almost like a cottage, that's kind of at the center of this. And you see that there's like two lanterns lit outside of it. She says, I just need to stop with the harbor master and pay the harbor fees, and then we'll be on our way. So you walk into this small building with her, and you see there's, a table and a few chairs, and then a long wooden counter. And you see an older middle-aged man kind of look up over this ledger book that he's got on the counter, and he looks up at her and he says, "Good evening. I assume that you're the last ship, because I'll be closing up soon." And she says, yes, in fact, I'm relieved that we made it before dark. And he says, yes, indeed. Well, how long will you be anchored? She says, well, hopefully for no more than 5 days. He says, I see. Well, I will collect 5 gold as your deposit. And she nods and she reaches into her pouch and pulls out 5 gold coins and sets them down on the counter. And then he counts them, you see, he puts them into a wooden lockbox, and then she signs this ledger. And you notice that she's looking at the ledger book for a moment, and then she kind of hands the quill back to the harbor master. And the harbor master says, and you notice that the harbor master actually, while she's signing the book, Cade, he's like looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
And then like when you notice him looking at you, like he looks away.
Okay.
She finishes signing the ledger book, and then she turns and she's like, thank you, Lumpkin. I hope you have a good evening. And he says, yes, ma'am, of course. You as well. Good night. And you leave the harbor master's cottage. At this point, she says, well, now that business is handled, let's go into the city, shall we?
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I could enjoy a good meal.
As could I.
And you follow her up a set of stone stairs that go up probably about 50 feet from the harbor. And then there's a cobblestone kind of path that goes another 100 feet to a wooden palisade and a gate. And there's a small gatehouse, and you see a gate guard. The gates are still open, but as you approach, the guard kind of steps forward and he looks at her and he looks at you. And he says, good evening, coming from the harbor. And she says, yes, I'm Captain Elysia. And she reaches into her tunic and she pulls out like a piece of paper and unrolls it and hands it to him. And he looks at it and he says, yes. He says, well, your timing's good. We're about to close up the gates. Anyone else from your crew? And she says, no, we were the last. I just checked in with the harbor master. And the guard says, very well then. And you notice his eyes dart over to you as well. And she says, he's my guest. He's from Tizia. And the guard kind of looks curiously and he says, all right, well, welcome to Cecilum. And he nods. So she nods and you follow her in. And as soon as you guys walk through the gates, the guards pull the gates closed and slide a big wooden board into the deadbolt position.
Mm-hmm.
Walking into the city, you see that the cobblestone street extends, it continues on into the city. But you see side streets, and the side streets are not paved. They're literally just dirt. Some of them have like dirt with some rocks, but it looks like this is the only street that's actually like cobblestone paved. Right away, you notice that there are 1- and 2-story buildings, mostly made of wood, but some of them seem to have like stone foundations or even stone construction on the first floor with like a wooden plaster second floor. And a lot of the style of this sort of reminds you of what you saw on Tizia, of the building style that the Iraqi people had constructed on Tizia.
Right.
A lot of wood plank buildings, very simple construction, straight lines, that kind of stuff. But as you walk in, you see people out in the streets. You see some buildings have like wooden posts with torches on them. Others have wooden posts with lanterns, oil lanterns and stuff. So there's some light, kind of peppered throughout the street. You see some street vendors with carts selling different odds and ends, trinkets, food, that kind of stuff. And as you and Captain Elysia continue to walk, she begins to kind of look down some of the side streets. And you notice that while most of the buildings on the main street have some kind of light source outside of them, a lot of the buildings down the side street seem dark, or you may notice like some flickering light from within, like candlelight or torchlight from within.
Yeah.
But it seems like the main street through Sasalem, heading west is kind of like the busiest and most vibrant. As she's walking, you pass a tavern, which is the first tavern that you pass. You see it kind of looks like maybe where some of the sailors would go. You see a few sailors already drinking, not from her crew, but maybe from some other crews, like already drinking mugs of ale and laughing outside. And you see a wooden sign over it says the Messy Lantern, and it's kind of like a lantern kind of on its side.
Yeah.
And there's flickering light from within from candles and stuff, and you hear a lot of sound and music, and you even see like through the doorway, which is just open, you see like two people wrestling, like two guys like that are shirts off just wrestling, and there's a crowd cheering around them. It kind of looks like a rowdy place.
Yeah.
And then you continue to walk, and she kind of like laughs. She chuckles a little bit as you pass by. She says, "That is a colorful place, but I don't think it's got the best food selection for our purposes. I do know of a nice, or at least a nicer tavern that has decent food if we continue walking a little bit." And as you notice that like there are other shops as well. Like there's you pass by a few like general stores, you pass by a blacksmith's, you pass by a tailor's shop, and you see like clothing on display, like kind of hanging from wooden posts outside on the porch. There's like an overhang. So you do see there's even like a potter and a cobbler. So it looks like there's actually, sort of a business, a lot of businesses in the city. So
yeah.
she walks for another couple of blocks, and she says, I think this would suit our purposes. She says it's not overly expensive, but they have modest food and accommodations. And she starts walking towards an inn that you see. It's a single-story inn with stone walls, and it looks like it's a very solid construction. But what you find curious is that it has a red tile roof. And the roof style is what catches your eye because it reminds you of Sacuran architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a wooden sign that's painted in green and red. And it has a picture of a deer and like a forest behind the deer. So you're kind of sort of surprised by this. And she looks at you and she smiles and she says, "I thought you might like this." She says the original building was constructed and the inn was founded by a man of your country.
Oh, like I see the roots of my home.
Yeah, and while it doesn't have the same elegance of like a building from a Sacuran city, you can tell that efforts were made to kind of give it that same feel, or a close approximation.
Yeah. I chuckle and tell her the last place probably would have suited my older brother a little more than this place.
She smiles and she says, "Well, as you can imagine, when sailors get off of ships, they like to occupy their time with celebration while they're on land. And I would say that Sasalem provides enough of the civilized world, but it still has its rough edges, I suppose you could say." She says the leadership of the city is a mix of nobility. She says, and she's explaining this like as you're walking into this inn. So When you walk in, there's kind of like a very nice entrance foyer, and it looks like the wooden construction of the interior was, has been around for maybe 20 years. Like it has some wear and tear. But when you walk into the foyer, you notice that there's a wooden cabinet, and it's kind of a black lacquered wooden cabinet with like a glass window that has displayed finery in it. Like you see this jade bowl, and you see a small statue, and it very much looks like something that was brought from home. Like it's the kind of cabinet, like a china cabinet, basically.
Kind of reminds me of my mother's things.
Yes, and it kind of very much has that look. Although the rest of the foyer, like the innkeeper's counter and the few chairs that are there, look like they were more like built here, perhaps, made of simple materials and not a lot of decorative elements. And you see an innkeeper who looks up at you from the counter, and he's old. Like he probably looks like he's in his 60s. He's got like white hair with a kind of a white stubble, and he's definitely from Arakazine. You're not quite sure about his specific ethnicity, but he's kind of fair skinned, and he looks up and he says, "Oh, good evening, folks. How can I assist you? Are you here for rooms or simply dinner and drinks?" And she says, "Well, certainly we would like to eat and have drinks, I'm assuming." And she looks to you.
Yes, I do too.
And she says, "Do you have any accommodations left?" And he says, I do indeed. Yes, we have 2 cots available." And she says, "Well, why don't we start with dinners and drinks and hold the cots and we'll decide." And he says, "Yes, very well. Right with me." And he leads you down the hall about 10 feet, and you see an opening that is kind of like a wooden archway. And again, you see this little hint of Sacuran construction, because the wood archway and the supports have intricate carvings, and they're like a spiraled dragon around a column. And you kind of see that influence. And even though the paint is kind of chipped, and again, because it looks like maybe this is 20, 25 years old, it's still kind of a little reminder of home. And he walks into this open tavern, and you see there are like 12 tables, some of them just 2 or 4 tops, some of them 6 or even 8 tops. And the whole place is full. And you see most of the people are Iraqi or Kronai. You see some tan folks, perhaps Suinized, and all of them are kind of seated, and most of them are wearing decent clothing, and some of them are wearing fine clothing. And you could smell the food. The minute that it hits you, you could smell the food, and it's like this reminder. You get whiffs of some of the spices used in Sacuran cuisine. And you are led by the innkeeper over to a table, just a small table where you and Elysia sit. And he says, "We'll be right out with you in just a few moments." And he kind of nods and walks away. And a few moments later, like a young man comes over and he says, "Good evening, here for food and drinks?" And she says, "Yes, please. We are very hungry. We've just come to port." And he says, and he looks at you, seeing that you're Sacuran, and he says, "Oh," he says, "Well, welcome. Welcome to the Slow Deer." He says, and he reaches into his apron and he pulls out a sheaf of paper, like a half piece of paper, and he sets it down on the table. He says, here are our entrees this evening." He's like, "May I bring you something to drink first?"
Yes, if you have any Sacuran ale or wine.
He says, "We do indeed." He says, we have both Sacuran ale and wine. And he says,
Wine.
and he says, and for you, miss. And she says, or for you, ma'am. And she says, I would like something on the sweeter side. She says, I suppose some Sacuran wine wouldn't hurt. And he says, excellent, I'll be right back. And he kind of walks off, and she turns the sheaf over, and you see that it's written in Iraqi, but it looks like there's, kind of a list of some menu items, and then, kind of listed out. And she says, I think that I am going to try this Sacuran duck. Would you be interested in trying it? They also have chicken, beef, looks like they have pork, and fish.
I haven't had duck in quite a while, so that does sound delicious.
Well, she says, I'm sure it's Nicean duck, but I would not be surprised if they had the proper spices, the Sacuran spices. That's really what makes the difference. And she smiles. The boy returns with a small, rounded bottle, very much in the style of what you would see at home in Sacura. And he sets it down, and you notice that this is a rice wine that has kind of a sweet flavor. And he sets that down with 2 small porcelain cups. And you notice that the cups are definitely Sacuran in style, and they're painted with really cool stylized art, with in kind of a blue ink on the white porcelain cups. But they look chipped, some of the paint's chipped off, as if maybe like they were imported many years ago, but have not been replaced. And he says, and have you selected what you'd like? And she says, I think we're both going to have duck. He says, oh, wonderful. He says that the chef will be very excited. And he turns and walks away. You and Elysia enjoy drinking the Sacuran wine. And for you, it's a reminder of home. Something kind of deep inside of you almost forgot what it was like to have a meal in a tavern, in an inn, prepared by someone with your kind of native food.
Yeah.
And as you're, sitting and having drinks, she says, you had mentioned that your interest was to go to Amron, something about your family?
Yes. I don't remember if I shared it with you or not, but my 2 brothers, my younger sister and my mother, we were on our way to Amron. Our family has holdings there, and we were set to go there and establish our holdings and build them up. And on the way, we unfortunately were shipwrecked.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. You'd mentioned that. I didn't mean to make you relive such a tragic thing, she says. But you and your brothers and sister and mother survived the shipwreck? And they're all on Nisia?
My 2 brothers and my mother, yes. Unfortunately, my sister did not make it. And as you say that, she refills your cup and refills hers, and she says, I'm terribly sorry. That is such a tragedy, but as I mentioned myself, one that I narrowly avoided, with the exception of the loss of my father when our ship was wrecked. She says, it's sadly not an uncommon tale. The deep seas around Nisia are known to be treacherous. Even some of the great Kemrog fleets were said to have been ruined long ago by unknown dwellers of the deep seas. Let us drink to their memories.
She she nods and raises her cup and clinks it to yours. She says, well, it is fortuitous then that we came across you, because I fear that had you been in the water for much longer, you could have suffered any number of dangers.
Cade chuckles at that. Perhaps, but it might be more fortunate that you found me than you realize. To be quite honest, me and my family had been on Nisia for about a year now, and one of the things I've been trying to that I want to do on this exploration mission is perhaps find somebody trustworthy to establish a trade with Nisia and the other places. And me and my brothers have established a mining colony there.
Really?
Yes.
She says, well, I must admit, I have not trafficked in any routes southeast of Kamamep because it's so plagued by the pirate fleets. I'm frankly surprised that your settlement hadn't been raided as of yet. Quite often, settlements in some of the smaller islands will pay tribute to the admirals to avoid being plundered.
Meta question. Does Cade know that the Nisia was paying any sort of tribute for protection?
To your knowledge, no. In fact,
okay.
To your knowledge, none of the people on Nisia had ever mentioned pirates coming there or plundering.
Okay.
And she says, I wonder if perhaps they've not taken note of Nisia because perhaps they don't know of your settlement, which is a blessing, to be sure. I've heard terrible tales of smaller towns being raided. Even the boldness of the admirals is unbounded. She says, even here on Kamamep, which is certainly a well-established island, she says some of the smaller towns have been raided. She says the Crowned have patrolled the waters around their island quite effectively, but nonetheless, their ships do not number as many as those of the admirals.
I see.
She says where we are now is, I suppose you could consider the northern capital of the island. Sasalem is where 3 of the 5 noble families who form the coalition of the Crowned, the ruling body of the island. 3 of them reside here. The other 2 reside in the southern city of Saphir. And Saphir is a much stronger naval base. They have a fortress. Their harbor is well defended, and their access to supplies and valuable ores and minerals from their mining operations, as well as timber from the forests, is sufficient for them to continue. And I would say they build 2 ships every year. So it gradually expands the naval forces that the Crowned command.
I see.
But some of the smaller villages and towns, especially along the coast, have been raided from time to time.
Okay.
She says, your journey to Amron should be much less risky, I would say. The waters north of the island are fairly well patrolled, and I've not heard, at least, of any significant pirate incursions in any recent times, to be sure.
That's good to hear.
She says Amron is a much smaller island. She says it's ruled by a noble house originally from the ancient kingdoms of Arakazine, House Draka. Have you heard of them?
Have I? Meta?
You have not.
Interesting. I tell her that.
Your father did not mention anything about the ruling body of Amron.
Okay.
She says, but they have been established for, I believe, fairly long, perhaps 40 years. She says, I think the original head of their noble house is the one that brought their family and their holdings here to establish the colony on Amron, and I believe he passed away within the last few years, but his oldest son has married and has a family, and he is now ruling the noble house. I believe he has a few siblings, perhaps as well, sisters or brothers. She says, I'm not particularly well versed on their noble house or their history. She says, but it's a much smaller island.
I appreciate all this information that you've been giving me.
She says, of course. She says, Cade, if I can be so bold, I must admit that I'm somewhat fascinated, having never really had the opportunity to get to know Sacuran. You are a good representative of your people.
Thank you. I try to...
She says, and your grasp of our language is excellent. I only detect the slightest accent.
I've had good teachers in Tizia.
She nods. And some moments later, the serving boy brings over a large platter with a whole roasted duck, surrounded by vegetables and rice. And the smell hits you like a punch in the face because it sends you back with flashbacks to countless meals back home.
Yes.
And your mouth starts to water, and she's her eyes open wide, and she's like, well, I have never seen anything this extravagant. And she looks up at the serving boy, and he says, enjoy, and he bows and he walks away. So you dig in, and you and Elysia have a wonderful meal. She regales you with stories of sailing to the different islands and how she eventually got her captain's commission and earned her papers. She mentions a few brushes with like small kind of pirate operations that she was able to either evade or to fight off. But overall, like it seems very, like a common story of someone who lives most of their life at sea.
Yeah.
Upon finishing, you see a man emerge from the back door, which you presume is where the kitchen is because you've seen the serving boy come and go.
Yeah.
You see an older man emerge, and you instantly recognize that this man is Sacuran. He is bald on the top and has like a white crown of short cropped hair. And he has like a very thin white mustache. And he kind of walks out, and he's wearing like a large apron, and he walks out towards you, and in Sacuran, he says, I had been told that there was someone from my country, and I was quite pleased to be able to serve you one of the dishes from our homeland. He says, what is your family name, if I may ask?
Responding in Sacuran, sir, the food you prepared tonight brought almost tears to my eyes. It's been so long. My family is the Zhen family.
And he looks up at you and he says, oh, the Zhen family.
I am most blessed and fortunate then to have you here in this humble inn. He says, allow me to introduce myself. And he bows and he says, I am Zhao Lin. He says, may I ask how it is that a member of your family has come to this area?
I stand up and return his bow and introduce my actual self as I am Go Zhen. And in short, just to like condense it, I give him the short version of my family on its way to Amron and our tragic shipwreck, and how and then I ran into our captain here.
He listens to the tale, and afterwards he does like a very proper like apology and a demonstration of condolences for your loss. And you kind of can tell that this man perhaps in your homeland would have been like a commoner, but one who is absolutely schooled in the appropriate etiquette.
Right.
He then turns to you and he says, I wish that I had had the opportunity to know your father. I hope that he is well in Sacura, and I hope that you find good fortune to balance out the misfortune which your family has suffered. He says, you are always welcome for my food, and I will always provide it. And it would be an honor someday to meet your brothers and your mother. It would bring me and my family great honor. And then he bows again.
I bow back. Thank you.
He says, please enjoy your drinks. He bows and he walks away. And you notice that the whole time, like, Captain Elysia was like looking and kind of looking back and forth with like childlike wonder. And when you sit down again, she refills both of your cups with the last of the bottle. And she raises a toast. She says, that was such a distinct pleasure. I've not heard your native tongue spoken before. She says it's a beautiful, almost musical sort of sound, isn't it?
Yes, it's been a while since I've spoken to anyone other than my brothers and the few crewmates, that other Sacurans that I came with.
She says, well, this evening has truly been a great treat for me. And she says, and if you'll allow me, I don't know if it's appropriate from where you come from for a woman to pay for a man, but it would be my honor to treat you for this meal and for the accommodations, if you would let me.
Meta, is that how it is over there? Is that unusual or not? I don't know.
It's less about gender and more about class. Like, as somebody who is from a noble family, you would likely pay for it, but it's also, you feel like here it's not necessarily an insult.
Right. I respond to her. Typically, it would be my responsibility to pay for this, but I will accept your graciousness with my heart, and I thank you for everything today, including giving me the information and the hope of establishing my family again.
She smiles and she says, my pleasure, truly, and thank you. And shortly thereafter, the boy comes over with a piece of slate, and in chalk, you see that he's written down like basically the total.
Yeah.
Like he has the check written down. And as you see it, your jaw kind of drops, because your grasp of costs for things is pretty decent, and you feel like, you know, a meal, like a decent meal for two people might be
5 or 6 silver pieces,
Yeah.
but your jaw kind of drops when you see that the total is 6 gold pieces.
Oh.
And you're assuming that that's because of the fact that you guys had a bottle of imported wine and basically an extravagant meal.
Yeah, yeah.
You notice that she reaches it, like you could kind of see her eyes go a little bit wide when she sees the total, and
yeah,
she's kind of like looking into her pouch, and you see she's counting coins.
I reach out and I say, please, this is a little more than even I was anticipating, so please let me help.
She says, I would be most grateful. I'm sorry, I didn't know that our feast would cost quite so much. And she seems to blush a little bit. And she puts out some of the coins. If you basically intend to split it, you be able to put out, some of the coins.
Yeah, I do. I also, as before he takes away the cups, I had, because you had mentioned that they were kind of chipped and cracked.
Yes.
I pick up the cups and I tell the boy, please tell the chef I appreciate everything tonight, and this is a small gift of mine. And as I hold the cups in my hand and I just kind of run my hands over them, you hear me mutter a couple little words, and I use material magic to repair these cups.
I had a feeling you were going to do that. All right. It is a minor change. So,
yes.
And it's basically a 1-round effect. So you can basically restore the cups to their original integrity for 4 qua.
Okay, I do that.
As you do this, you notice the boy is like in shock, as if you just did like a magic trick. He's like, whoa, how did you do that? Wow, I can't wait to show Master Zhao. And he takes the cups and he goes back into the kitchen. And when you look at Elysia, she says, well, Sacuran holy man, you are indeed full of surprises. And she too seems quite impressed. She says, I must admit, I don't know much of the gods of your land. She says, but I am impressed so far.
All I try to do is follow the will of the moon and keep things in balance.
She nods. Upon paying, you guys both get up. You walk back out to the foyer. The innkeeper says, will you be staying then? And she says, yes, the meal was wonderful, and your chef is amazing. And he says, oh, thank you. Yes, we would not have nearly the service without Zhao. He is truly a master in the kitchen. He says, I do have 2 cots in a somewhat private area of the mezzanine. There's a screen which you can put up. Would that suffice? And she says, yes. He says, very well. 2 silver pieces each, please. And she nods.
I pay my part.
Okay. He says, yes, follow me right this way. And he leads you upstairs. And you see that there is a basically wraparound hallway with a wooden half wall that kind of overlooks the main part of the tavern. And that you see that there's kind of like every 10 feet, there's sort of like a folded screen. And the fabric on the screens is all painted in the Sacuran style. And again, it all looks very kind of old and weathered. But you see that these screens are set up, and then the cots are actually also in the Sacuran style with like kind of carved wood frames, and then like a layer of bedding over the rope suspended structure. And he gestures to one of the spaces, and you see 2 cots there, and a small little nightstand with like a candle holder on it. And he says, "There you are. Good evening." He says, "There is an outhouse out the back. If you go to the end of the hallway on the first floor, there's a door that will lead to an outhouse if you have need for it. And there's a freshwater wash basin." And he says, "Good night." And he bows and turns and walks away. Elysia looks at you. Yeah, she looks at you and she says, "Well, I know these aren't private rooms, but the inns that have private rooms tend to be a bit more costly." But she says, "This will be more than suitable for me."
This will be fine for me as well.
And she smiles and she says, "Well then, Cade, good night." And you see she starts to kind of take off her sword and starts taking off her leather armor.
I go to my side of the little wall thing.
Yeah, and basically you guys, get into your cots. The tavern below is a little noisy at first when you lay down, but as people finish their meals and leave, it quiets down. And then at a certain point, it becomes quiet. And basically, all you hear is the sound of other people along the long stretch of the mezzanine sleeping, some snoring. And you hear Captain Elysia breathing longer, deeper breaths as she's starting to fall asleep.
Okay. I'll go to sleep as well.
Okay. You awaken the next morning to the sounds of pots and pans and dishes and people talking below. And you kind of turn around and you see she's already put on her armor and is slinging her sword. And she says, "Oh, good morning." She says, I didn't want to waken you, but I thought we'd go down and perhaps have some breakfast before embarking into the city.
Yes, let's do that.
Wonderful. You get your stuff, you go downstairs, you sit at a table. Some very basic breakfast is brought out. Nothing Sacuran even remotely. It seems like just very basic kind of eggs and potatoes with some ham. But you eat your breakfast, kick in a silver piece,
yeah.
And then you head out. You leave the Slow Deer. And as you emerge in the daylight, you see that, a little bit more of the city. You go for a long kind of walk with Elysia around the city. She kind of shows you some of the different places, some of the inns and taverns. She shows you the Carpenters Guild. She takes you to the west side of the city, and you see there's another gate. And she says, out the western gate is the road towards the lake. She says, there's quite a bit of business along the lake as well, not simply on the harbor side. She
Okay.
says she says most of the lake involves fishing, but there is some. They do harvest wild rice, and there are some small farms around the lake that also provide produce for the city as well. She says, and there's a few little hamlets that kind of follow around the lake as well. It's quite a large inland lake, and it's fed from the mountains, from the snowmelt in the mountains.
Wow, this place is quite fortunate to have such resources.
Oh, she says, yes. Well, she says, I'm certain that it was one of the first of the islands to be kind of colonized and settled. She says, I don't know the exact history, but I know that there's quite a lot of people. She says, I think the population is somewhere between 40 and 50,000, spread out over the cities and towns and villages around the island.
Oh, most impressive.
Yes, she says the lake forms sort of an interesting Y shape, and she says, but in between is another town which also has seen a fair amount of prosperity.
Okay.
Lake Swaff is extensive enough that there are many small hamlets and villages around it, but the town of Machon is probably the largest that is on the lake, and it's a hub for a lot of the fishing industry, but also the mining in the mountains.
Reminds me of Tizia a little bit.
She says, yes, well, it is certainly an important part of commerce on the island. She says, but truly, Sasalem is the connection with the rest of Nisia, at least on the northern side of the island. She says, I would say that if you were looking for someone to take you to Amron, we should probably go down to the harbor and perhaps check in with the harbor master, or we could stop by any of the boards near the main gate to see if there are any captains who are already going to Amron for anything, and perhaps you can get on with the crew there.
Cade's thinking a little bit about whether he should do that or should he travel on his own way again. But he says, let's go take a look.
So she nods and begins to kind of walk with you. And as you're walking back through the city, you do in fact see a few like wooden notice stands, like bulletin boards basically, and some posts of captains who are looking for crew to go to different points throughout Nisia. But you also notice like some kind of hand scrawled papers that have been tacked to some of these boards about missing people.
Oh. And
you see like, some of them are like the names of men, some of them are the names of women, some of them are have descriptions of children and like when they went missing and their family's name, and but you see kind of a trend as you pass by a few of these boards where you see like 6 or 7 different posts about different missing people.
I asked Captain Elysia about that. I was like, what seems to be going on with all these missing notices?
She says, I don't know. I found that peculiar myself. She's like, I don't remember anything on that great of a scale. I mean, certainly from time to time sailors or other folk go missing, but often it's simply a matter of them having left town for whatever reason. She says, but to see so many names in such great numbers is somewhat concerning, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Says, and you notice, like, as you're talking about this and walking, you see a few of the constables, and she walks up to one of them and kind of asks about it. And constable's like an Iraqi man, and he says, yes, within the last 3 weeks, a large number of people have gone missing. Men, women, children, older, younger. He says it has been quite vexing. There's been no pattern to it. Some of these are townsfolk. Some of them were craftsmen, fisher folk, lake people. He says it's been absolutely confusing. He says there's been no rhyme or reason to it, and the captain of the guard has investigated every opportunity, and we've all been tasked with asking around to see if anybody's seen any of these people. The harbor master, Lemkin, has been tasked with keeping a track of everyone who comes and goes from the harbor. He says it's but there's been no explanation for it. And she says, "Oh, thank you for the information." And he nods, and then they continue walking on their way. And she says, that is quite disturbing. She says, I've been gone for a month, so that would explain why it seems to be something that's been happening for just in the past few weeks.
Captain, do you happen to know of any other captains in this port that would be trustworthy and brave enough, of course, unless you prefer to take this opportunity to establish trade with Tizia?
She says, "Would that I could. I do not own my own boat, however." She says, I'm a commissioned captain, but she says you would need to likely speak with a representative of one of the noble houses of the crown in order to establish such a thing, as they own most of the ships on Kamemep.
I see.
She says, I do know one. He's the third son of the noble family of Ulgren. He could perhaps be an emissary, or at least someone with whom you could speak of such an arrangement, and perhaps he would have the ability to negotiate something on behalf of his noble family.
I see. He could be the introduction I need if I could win his favor.
Indeed, he seems a fair fellow, and as I said, he is the third son of the noble family of Ulgren, so he is younger, but still perhaps an opportunity to establish such a beneficial thing would be something that would pique his interest.
I'll have to try to meet him.
She says, we could go down by the harbor, and I could see if any of his family's ships are in the harbor, and then speak with their captains if they're around.
Let's do that. They might even have a ship going towards my actual destination, Amron.
Indeed. So she kind of leads you back through the city. You leave the east gate and head down the stairs towards the harbor. And again, you see, being that it's morning, you see some of the fishing boats that probably went out early at dawn are returning, and they're unloading loads of fish to workers. And it's at this point that you see the dock workers are a whole mix of people. You see Iraqi, you see some Kronai, you see some Suineist, you even see some Nizak.
What do those look like? I don't think I actually know that.
I think you do.
I do?
Actually, no. Maybe you didn't meet a Nizak. So you see a tall but thin and very muscular. Like, imagine like somebody who's very cut, but with like 2% body fat. That's kind of what they're like ectomorphic. And you see that they're tall, they have long arms and long legs. They're very muscular, but they have gray skin.
Oh.
And no body hair. No hair on their head, no hair on their face, on their body, completely hairless, with a prominent brow and a prominent lower jaw.
That is strange, I say, as Cade.
She says, oh, and she kind of sees where you're looking, and she says, oh, those are Nizak. She says they come from Arakazine. She says there aren't that many of them, but some came to Nisia. And you see that they're wearing like, kind of like normal dock worker clothes.
Yeah.
But when you see them unloading cargo, like one of the medium-sized ships, there's like a pulley system, and they're unloading crates and barrels. And you see like one crate being like unloaded and carried by 4 men. And then you see like another crate come out, and it's lowered onto the shoulders of the Nizak, and he reaches out his arms and grabs it himself.
Jesus.
And he's basically carrying like one crate.
Yeah.
That it took like 4 normal men to carry.
Yeah, that's most impressive.
You see this work happening on the docks. You see most of the boats are fishing boats or like medium-sized cargo ships, smaller or medium-sized cargo ships. Yeah. And the only large ship you see is the one that you saw last night when you pulled into the harbor. And it's not docked. It looks like it's too big to be on the docks. It's anchored, but it's a full-size caravel.
Oh, okay.
And you see, like, it's anchored kind of out in the harbor. And you could see that there's like some kind of writing on the masthead, but it's almost too far away to see with your normal vision.
How about I use what's it called? Corporeal magic to strengthen my eyes.
You could indeed do that. Make a willpower plus magic roll.
Okay, I think that's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, 5, 7, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16. No, I rolled a lot of 1s on that one.
16 is nonetheless 2 steps higher than what you needed. So you could basically have binocular vision for 10 minutes.
I'll do that.
So minus.
Actually, scratch that. I'm going to. Can I actually say to Captain Elysia, with your permission, may I grant you for a short time, specialized eyesight of sorts?
She looks at you curiously and she says, a blessing?
For a short time, I saw that ship over there and I couldn't quite read it, but I have the capability to give myself the ability to read it from this far.
She smiles and she says, well, I suppose so. And you could kind of tell she has like a mix of excitement and maybe a little of the unknown.
Yeah. So would I be able to branch that and to give it to one more person with that good of a success?
Yes. So it'll last a minute, but it'll affect you and her.
Okay.
So you extend your abilities, and you see she kind of like reels back for a moment. She says, this is amazing. I could see so clearly, so far away. And do you gesture to the ship that you were looking at?
I do. And I say, that's what I was trying to see.
She looks out for a moment, and you see this as well. You see like below the mast is an inscription, or not the mast, I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank. What's the front of the ship?
The bow? Yes,
below the bow, you see like a big wooden sign, and it says the Expeditious Retreat. It's like the name of the ship.
Okay.
And it looks like the ship's obviously seen some years, right? It's not like in amazing shape.
Yeah, it's not brand new.
But it's a sizable ship. And she looks and she says, I'm not familiar with that ship. I'm not, to my knowledge at least. I don't believe that it's under the command of any of the crowned. She says perhaps it's from another island.
Can I see what type of crew they have?
So you could see, because of this vision, you could see that there are obviously not the full crew, but you see like 8 men, kind of sitting just on the deck. They're not mopping. They're not doing any work. Like literally, in fact, a few of them are drinking like bottles of ale. Like they're just sitting on the deck. All of them are armed. All of them have swords. But they're basically just chilling on the deck. And they seem to be a mix of Iraqi and Suinized and Kronai, like basically people from Arakazine.
Yeah. Maybe they're from Arakazine. It seems to be the type of people from that continent.
She says, perhaps. I wonder if Lemkin would know.
He should know. He's the harbor master.
She says that ship is certainly large enough for carrying large quantities of cargo.
Let's go ask.
Oh, yeah. So you guys continue walking down the stairs. You notice that she's still like in awe for, the remainder of the duration of your spell. She's just kind of like looking around at different things and kind of giggling to herself. And then you get to the bottom of the stairs. You walk along the large walkway, and you get to the harbor master's cottage. And you go in and you see Lemkin, the same guy. He's wearing. You notice that he's like pretty well dressed, like kind of like what a noble would wear, though you don't really know what a Iraqi noble would wear. But you could tell just by comparing to like the people that you knew on Tizia and the people that you've seen around the city here so far. He's kind of dressed in like finery, and you notice that he has like several rings. He has like a gold bracelet. He has like a gold necklace.
Does what he's wearing kind of remind me of what the mayor of Tizia would wear? Kind of like that level?
No, like better.
Even better. Okay.
Yeah.
That's different.
He looks up and he says, good day to you. He says, I take it you found refuge in the city? And she says, yes, thank you, Harbor Master Lemkin. Yes, we did. We had a fine dinner and feel very rested. She says, my associate was wondering about some potential for travel arrangements. Do you know if there are any ships whose destinations are Amron, perhaps? And he says, Amron, let me see. And he pulls out his book and opens it and starts paging through. He says, yes, there is a delivery of iron to House Draka. It's going to depart in 4 days, pending the arrival of the shipment, of course. And she says, the iron's coming from elsewhere? And he says, yes, the iron's being shipped up from Saphir and should arrive here within the next 2 to 3 days. And then the ship from House Eriksson is going to depart for Amron, scheduled 4 days from now. And she says, do you know who the captain of that ship will be? And he says, yes, I believe it is Captain Bjorn. And she says, yes, okay. Well, thank you. Perhaps we'll inquire about the potential for my guest to be a passenger. And he says, yes, I believe House Eriksson could accommodate that, but you'll want to check with the captain.
Harbor Master.
Of course. And he looked at you and he says, yes, sir.
A question, if you will. Is there a lot of iron going to Amron?
He says, well, I would say perhaps twice a year they receive a shipment of iron. Yes.
Okay. It's just, I don't know, something about that just stuck out in my mind.
He says, well, they also have their own, albeit smaller, mining operations. But I believe that they trade in copper and silver as well. But I believe they typically only ship once per year, usually.
Okay. One more question. Whose ship is the Expeditious Retreat?
He says, Expeditious Retreat. Let me see.
The large caravel.
Ah, yes. It arrived no, let's see. 3 days ago. And he pages back. He says, that would be Captain Blackthorn from O'Shea. Quite a long journey.
From Arakazine, I believe.
Yes. It was curious, though. They had very little cargo. I inquired if they needed boats to unload, and he said they did not. He said they were only stopping over for a short time and continuing on. He didn't mention where they were going, but he paid up front.
Thank you, Harbor Master. Appreciate that.
Oh, yes, certainly. And she says, have a great day. And he's like, oh, yes, you as well. And then you see like a couple other sailors come in with paperwork, and he calls them up and starts doing stuff, and she nods to the door.
Mm-hmm. As we get outside and we kind of get away from more people, Captain Elysia, and this is also kind of a little meta, I guess, because I'm not super familiar with some things, but is there a strong slave trade in Arakazine in this area?
She says, not in this area, but I've heard terrible stories. Some of the pirate fleets from Kuap Vogam take prisoners.
Okay. I just found it curious that a large ship was here and that there's been a lot of disappearances going on, and perhaps maybe just a figment of my imagination, but perhaps they're here to take some cargo they shouldn't be having.
She says, oh, that would be quite a twist, wouldn't it?
Yes.
She says, well, let's hope that is not the fate of those who are missing.
I hope not.
She says, shall we try to find Captain Bjorn?
Yes, let's do that.
She nods. You head back into the city, and you basically go on a walking tour, or like a pub crawl.
Yeah.
Basically, she goes from one place to the next looking for this captain. And you end up passing by and this is off of the beaten path. So like you head off of the main street down like one of the side streets that's like just dirt road. And you pass by some very humble and modest cottages where people live, and some other shops that kind of look a little more on the pay scale of like what commoners would afford.
Mm-hmm.
Seamstresses, tailors, cobblers, that kind of stuff. A few barrel makers. You pass by some stables. You pass by a butcher's shop, that kind of thing. And she comes up to an inn, and it's a wooden building, single story with a tall pitched roof. And you notice one corner of the building is scorched, like as if there had been a fire there. And you see, it looks like they like took out some of the burnt wood and just nailed up other planks of wood over it very haphazardly.
Right.
And it's kind of like the last stop, and she's like, well, he could be here. And you see there's a sign out front with like a picture of a man that looks like he's like juggling 6 loaves of bread. And she says, this is the Careless Baker. It's not what I would call the finest inn, but it is frequented by a lot of sailors who are looking to save coin. So you go in with her, and the doors open directly into the tavern. And you don't see any stairs leading up. It looks like perhaps there's an attic, but you don't see any stairs leading up. You see a number of booths, just simple wooden construction. You see several long tables with benches. And you see about 20 different kind of sailors and local commoners at tables. Some of them are playing cards and drinking. Some of them are just drinking and eating food. And she looks through the room and she says, there he is. And she gestures across the room to a round table where you see a kind of tall-looking blonde man, fair-skinned, with like a long blonde beard that's kind of tied up almost in sort of, imagine like a Viking beard braid.
Yeah.
And she kind of walks over there with you, and she says, Captain Bjorn. And the man looks up, and you can see he's just red-eyed, as if maybe he's been drinking all night and hasn't slept.
Yeah.
And you see that the other guys at the table with him are also in the same condition. And he looks up bleary-eyed, and he looks and he says, Elysia? She says, yes, Captain Bjorn. Well met. She says, I hope you are doing well. And he says, I've been worse. What can I help you with? And she says, my associate, this is Mr. Cade. He is interested in booking passage to Amron. And we heard from Harbor Master Lemkin that you were heading there in a few days. And he looks for a moment and he says, yes, a week. No, it's already been 3 days. Yes, 4 days. We go in 4 days. And he looks at you and he kind of squints for a minute and he says, Sacuran?
That I am.
Oh, want to go to Amron, eh?
Yes.
He says, we can make room for you. It's not a long journey. 1 day.
That's wonderful.
He says, will you be joining us, Captain Elysia? And she says, well, no, I'm waiting here for my orders for my next job. And he says, oh, very well then. And he looks at you and he says, my ship will be arriving sometime in the next few days. I'll be assembling my crew and we'll depart in 4 days. Be there at dawn.
I shall. Thank you, good sir.
He nods. He says, the ship is the Grey Owl. It bears the crest of House Eriksson.
Wonderful.
She says, thank you, Captain Bjorn. You should get something to eat. It might help. And he nods and kind of slumbers off. She turns and leads you out. As you're walking out, you make a perception plus stealth roll.
Stealth. Okay, his perception is, that's gonna be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 die. It's always hard to pick up D4s. That's the only thing I don't like about them. 3, 4, 6, 9, 10, 11, 14.
Okay. as you're leaving the building, you see something kind of across the street and a little bit down the block. You see two men basically dragging, like one of them, like each one of them is holding a woman like on each side of her arms. And they're like dragging her into an alley. And there's someone wearing like a hooded cloak walking in front of them. And they're walking into an alley about 60 feet down from you and then across the street. And you notice
she's struggling or is she unconscious? It seems like.
Yes, she's struggling, and like one has her arm and his hand over her mouth, and then the other is carrying her other arm. They're literally like dragging her into the alley, and whoever's walking in front of them, about 5 feet in front of them, you can't really see, but that person's wearing like a hooded cloak.
I tap Captain Lee's shoulder. I was like, I see we have somebody that needs some help over here, and I start running that way.
Okay, she follows. Time to make an agility plus athletics roll. And I am going to roll as well.
Agility plus athletics. Okay, so that's 5d4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Better. 9, 11, 12.
Okay. You get to the mouth of the alley, and she's like 10 feet behind you. You get to the mouth of the alley, you turn, and about halfway down the alley, there's, garbage and broken barrels and crates and things kind of scattered in the alley. Halfway down the alley, you see the two men, but you don't see the woman that they were dragging, and you don't see the person in the hooded cloak. And they just seem to be walking, like their backs are to you. Now they're just walking down the alley.
Can I... Okay, what could I do here? I want to...
Elysia runs up behind you and looking down the alley as well. She says, what is it? I just see two men.
There was 3 men and they were dragging a struggling woman. Now I don't see the women and the other man.
She looks down the alley. She looks on the rooftops. She says, I don't see anyone either.
Can I, where's my magic at? Can I extend my spiritual magic to try and sense any other people?
Oh, that is interesting. Go ahead and make a willpower plus magic roll.
Okay.
What's your quiet currently?
31.
Okay, so go ahead and make the roll. Let's see how you do.
Willpower and magic, that's 8. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 6, 8, 10, 13, 16, 17.
Okay. Minus off 5 qua. You extend your sight. You see the overlay of the spirit realm. You don't see any spirit beings. However, you see resonance. And the resonance that you see is, I have to look at your magic types, what you're trained in.
Yep. Material, spiritual, and of course, corporeal.
Okay. You see resonance of magic that was used like halfway down the alley.
Yeah.
But you aren't familiar with what magic type it is. So you know that something magical happened, but you're not familiar with what it is.
I call out to the other two.
What do you say?
You too. And I say this in Iraqi.
The men turn and they look back down the alley.
And
You
I'm
notice that
walking
they
towards
both have like swords, but they're not drawn.
I'm just walking towards them. I don't have anything drawn.
Okay. One of them says, like, as you're walking, and Elysia is walking behind you. One of them says, "What do you want?"
Where's the woman and the other man?
He looks to the guy next to him, and they kind of look at each other. And the guy says, "I don't know what you're talking about. We're on our way back to the docks."
Your answering is going to cost you. Answer my question. And I keep coming forward.
Make a... Actually, don't even bother, because your roll is high enough. You can tell that they're getting a little itchy.
Of course.
And like their hands kind of drift towards their swords, but they don't pull their swords. And one of them says, "Listen here, I don't take orders from anyone who isn't a captain of the ship that I work on. I don't know what you thought you saw, but you're wrong, friend. And I suggest you back up and go about your business."
Would that be the captain or the ship, the Expeditious Retreat?
Now make a perception plus social manipulation roll.
Perception is 3, social is 2, so I have 5. 6, 8, 12, 13.
He says, "I don't know that ship. We work the drowned rat." And that is when you're fairly certain that he's lying.
Yeah. I'll ask one more time. Where is the other man and the woman?
So you are now 10 feet away from them.
Yep.
The one guy says, "Come any closer and we're going to carve you up, Sacuran."
I'm going to use whatever claw is necessary to grow another set of arms and grow in size.
Okay. So, this is not a spell. Well, let me think. Is this a spell? Is it rooted in a spell that you already know?
I think part of it is. The other rest is just like straight corporeal.
Form? So the arms isn't, but the hulking form is.
Yeah.
That is a spell that you know.
Yes, I see it.
Okay.
That's 6 qua.
So go ahead and make your magic plus willpower roll. Let's see how that comes out.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 18.
Oh my god. All right. So you can increase your size and your strength, or you could increase your strength and the duration of the increase of your strength.
Strength and duration.
Okay, so you're going to roll 2d4 and tell me what the result is.
4.
Okay, so that's 4 plus 2 is 6. And that will be for 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So for 10 minutes, Cade will have a strength of 7, which is a lot. That is superhuman. Okay, you do this, and it is undeniable that you are now, your form literally changes, right? Minus off 6 qua.
6 qua. Okay.
And now you're going to roll a straight agility roll.
Oh, that's not good for me.
This is initiative.
Okay. Ooh, 7. A 3 and a 4.
Okay, you actually beat them.
Good.
They had more dice. I got a 6. All right, so you can make the first move.
Let's see how this goes. I'm going to go up to one of them. Let's just say the left one. I'm going to grab him with all 4 of my arms and attempt to rip one of his arms off.
Okay, so that is a hand-to-hand strength-based move because you're basically trying to grapple his arm and tear it off. You're going to make a strength, and remember your temporary magically enhanced strength is 7.
Right.
Strength plus hand-to-hand roll, so you have 9 dice. Good lord.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, here we go. Okay, that's 6, 8, 9, 9, 12, 14, 18, 23.
Oh my god. I think you might have actually just ripped off his arm. That is quite epic. So 7 damage to his arm. You hear the bone crack as you grapple it and pull it, and you hear the flesh tear, and the man screams a high-pitched scream as you tear off his arm. The other man pulls his sword and swings it at you to attack.
Yes. Of course. It's reasonable.
And he hits just barely. For 5 total damage. Now you are wearing, what are you wearing? Leather armor?
Leather.
Now I'm going to say that you don't have your shield.
Yes.
At the ready, that it would be slung on your back because.
Yeah.
So your leather armor soaks 3 of the 5. And your durability will go down from 14 to 11.
11.
So you only take 2 health damage.
Okay. Got it.
Elysia pulls out her sword and she attacks. Countering, she attacks the man, hitting him, and will do 4 damage. He's just wearing clothes, so she carves into him, and he's like, ah!
Yeah.
Next round, I need to make a endurance roll because this guy is probably all right. He's not in shock, but he has 1 arm and he's bleeding profusely. He is going to punch you because he has 1 arm, so he's going to punch you. He will hit and do 2 non-lethal damage. So you're going to take 2 more health.
Yep, got it.
And it is your turn.
I'm going to take the person who just hit me, and I'm going to club the shit out of the other person with him.
With his arm?
With his whole body.
Oh, with his old. All right. So make another strength plus hand-to-hand roll.
Okay, I got all that dice right here. 6, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17. That was a little low.
Good lord. All right, so that's going to be 9 non-lethal damage. And I'm going to make a agility roll, which he fails. He got a 7. So you basically take the one guy with a missing arm and use him and swing him into the other guy. You hit the other guy, and both of them basically fall to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And they are knocked prone.
Can I take a moment to say what am I gonna say? Ready to start talking? And I'm like imagining Cade's voice now is like a lot deeper. He doesn't sound very nice anymore because when he's just acting with other people, he just, seems like a very polite person.
Yes. So here's how the beauty of this system will work. You are basically intimidating them.
Yes.
For that roll, you're going to use your strength plus social manipulation.
So that would be 9
dice.
Right?
Yep.
1, 2, 3,
You're going to
4,
make
5,
that
6,
versus
7,
their
8,
willpower.
9. Okay. Five, 7, 10, 13,
Good guess.
15, 17, 20.
Okay. I rolled a 7.
Yeah.
You are staring over them in this hulking form. And the one guy whose arm you ripped off loses consciousness. The other guy, who's got blood all over him and he's been cut, says, okay. Don't kill us. What do you want?
Where did the woman and the man go? I already asked you.
Oh, I don't know. I'm telling you, we were told to grab her and bring her here, and then he took her and he disappeared. He didn't tell us where he was going.
What was his name?
Captain Blackthorn.
Captain Blackthorn. Captain, do you recognize that name?
She looks at you and she says, that was the name that Lemkin said for the captain that registered that caravel.
Oh.
And the man on the ground who's still conscious nods.
I see.
He says, he's not our captain, really. I don't know how to explain it. We were shipwrecked. We commandeered that ship. And we were well on our way. Well, we were going to commandeer the ship. And he showed up. He appeared. I don't know how to explain it. But in the midst of our battle to take the ship, he just appeared. He wields magic I've never seen before. He made the ship move as if there was a great wind blowing in the sails no matter where we went. A few of the men along the way spoke of trying to take him out in the night. He made their heads explode with flame.
Quite the individual.
He doesn't tell us why he does what he does. He just told us that we had to come here, that there was something he needed. And we've been here for a few days, and he's had us bring certain people to different places. I can't explain it. I don't know why. I mean, they're no one fancy. He says the fanciest one was the child of a noble, but everyone else has just been commoners or shopkeepers or different people. I'm not sure why he wants who he wants.
Can Cade make a roll to think about what type of magic is being used here? And my personal feeling is that there's some sort of like necromantic type magic happening with all these victims being abducted.
Okay, go ahead and make a perception plus magic roll.
Perception plus magic, that's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Die.
And at this
Perhaps
time,
I've heard of it.
Elysia has her sword, obviously it's already drawn. She has it kind of leveled at the man in case he tries to make a move.
Right. Okay, that's 5, 9, 10, 14, 15, 18.
You're fairly certain that whatever the resonance was that you saw with Spirit Sight was a magic type that you're not aware of.
Right.
You don't think it was spiritual in nature, which would lead you believe that perhaps it's not necromantic. At least
I was thinking
at least the resonance that you saw.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about the magic that that person used to like go away or whatever. It was just, I'm thinking like, why are they taking all these people? What the hell did they need all these people for? That's like what I'm thinking.
That your guess as a player is as accurate as your guess as Cade, because you only know what you know and what you've perceived.
I understand. Captain, what do you think we should do with these two?
She says, I think I'm going to call the constables if you don't mind keeping an eye on them. I think the constables need to know about this and find out more about what's going on here.
I agree.
She nods and she runs off. And about 5 minutes later, she returns with a squad of 4 constables. And she, you could tell that she's been explaining what's going on.
I've also reduced my size again. I went back to normal before they came.
Yes. And they come up with manacles and rope, and they basically bind up. Oh, one more thing. You think that the guy whose arm you ripped off is probably going to bleed out and die unless you do something to staunch the bleeding.
I will. What's that spell down there? It's called
Restore the Flesh. Restore the Flesh.
Yes.
And downscale it to just
so to keep him alive.
He doesn't die.
Yeah.
So minus off 4 qua, and you basically stabilize him so that he's still unconscious, but you heal the wound so he's not bleeding out. Do you heal yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, how much health?
So you could modify Restore the Flesh.
Yeah.
To affect yourself in a greater area of effect. So you basically heal yourself and both of those guys. If you want to do that, it would be 5 qua instead of 4.
Yeah, let's do that. I'll take the extra qua and restore myself.
I will roll. And I rolled a 2 plus 1 is 3. So you gain back 3 health.
Okay.
The constables arrive. They tie up these guys' manacles, and then they start escorting them away. And Captain Elysia says, I don't know what's going on with all of this, but I suspect that it's much more sinister than perhaps what even these fools thought.
Oh, certainly.
She says, I would ask you something, Cade, though you are not beholden to me for anything.
Ow.
I would ask you, perhaps, to stay here until this is resolved. She says
what I aim to do.
There could be great benefit in serving the crown if you were to uncover this mystery and deal with this, or be part of the solution. It could curry great favor with the crown.
Oh, I know all about that with the nobilities.
She nods and she says, perhaps it's time to visit House Eriksson.
Yes. Also, may I ask a favor of you?
Yes.
Do not tell people what you saw me do.
she smiles and she says, I've gathered as much. Though it is not common for Sacurans in this part of Nisia, most people have heard that Sacuran holy men wield great power with their gods and great favor. She says, but I will keep your blessings discreet.
I appreciate it.
You follow Elysia out of the alley and begin walking back towards the main street. And you turn in a different direction, one that you haven't gone, that kind of goes towards the northern part of the city. And you see here, the streets are paved with cobblestones. And you see even the quality of the buildings and the construction seems to be of a finer caliber. And as you walk down sort of a maze of these different streets, you sort of hit the furthest point north in the city, and you see this large, like 3-story building, and a 10-foot wall, a 10-foot tall stone wall surrounding this estate. And she says, let's seek an audience with House Eriksson. And she starts leading you towards this large mansion. And that, my friends, is where we'll end this interlude episode of High Adventure. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you'll like, subscribe, and continue to follow the adventures of Cade. We'll see you next time.
Well, hello, and welcome to Bill Allen World. I am Wizzy, the Wizard. I'm back once again to remind you to subscribe and click on the notifications button, and also watch videos that are over there. Tune in to the next episode of whatever show you were just watching, and watch other shows featuring Bill. He made me say that, because he's a narcissist. Okay, bye.